Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. It's a beautiful fall day here on campus as I look over the main quad, oftentimes referred to as the God Quad. It's a rather quiet and serious week here on campus for our students. Many of the students are engaged in midterms. At the end of this week, we begin fall break for the students. So while it's a bye weekend for the football team and gives them a long-awaited reprieve and a time for healing before they start up another 3-game home stretch with 2 night games in USC and North Carolina to follow, it's an intense period of study for our students with a much-needed break to follow. So it's beautiful times on campus here. I think that in many ways, fall is the best season here in South Bend, although really all the seasons are beautiful, although our warmer climate friends would beg to differ about the winter season in this area, but all is good. The COVID situation on campus continues to be managed incredibly well by many people, including the person that we're going to interview today, our Vice President for Student Affairs. Out of a few thousand tests last week, we had only 12 positive cases that were reported, and that comes out to less than 1% positivity rate. I want to thank all of you for abiding by our COVID protocols when you come back for the football weekends in particular, or any time to visit campus. We highly encourage everyone to be vaccinated, and we ask that everybody wear masks when indoors in any building on campus outside of times when you'll be eating and drinking. And folks have really complied, and we haven't seen any spikes, which is terrific given the first few football weekends. So it's my distinct pleasure today to introduce to you. For many, he will be new to you. Our Vice President for Student Affairs, Father Gerry Olinger, Holy Cross priest. He's a native of Springfield, Pennsylvania, so right outside of Philly. And Father Gerry graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's degree in history and government from Notre Dame. He went on to earn 2 postgraduate degrees from the university. So he's a triple domer, a Juris Doctor, again, cum laude. I didn't know this, Father Gerry, very impressive, from our law school in 2004, and a Master of Divinity in 2009. After law school, Father Gerry had a calling to enter the seminary and was ordained a Holy Cross priest, much to our gratitude and joy, in April of 2010. Father Gerry served right after being ordained for 9 years in various senior level roles at the University of Portland. He, prior to becoming the Vice President for Student Affairs in June of this year, he served as the Vice President for Mission Engagement and Church Affairs at the university. There are 5 areas that really comprise the Student Affairs division: residential life, campus ministry, student development, health and wellness, and career and professional development. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Father Gerry resides as a priest in residence at Alumni Hall, and we're sorry you weren't able to find a residence in Soren, but we know that Alumni is a really good backup. So welcome, Father Gerry. It's great to be with you. And let's start out with your calling, if you would be so kind to share with us, to the priesthood. You didn't enter the seminary until completing your law school degree here at Notre Dame. And I wonder if this is something that vocation to the priesthood was something that you had wrestled with for several years, and who were key influencers for you? And it had to be somewhat scary, being the oldest of 4 kids and with 3 younger sisters. to respond to this call to become a priest and enter the seminaries. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
No, happy to. And Lou, thanks again for the invitation to be with you today. So my vocation to the priesthood, I guess, first developed when I was in middle school. As you mentioned, I'm the oldest of 4 children. And it was actually when my mom was expecting my youngest sister, Colleen. I was an altar server at the time at my Catholic parish outside of Philadelphia, St. Kevin's Parish in Springfield. And my mom would often come with me to early morning mass and attend mass when I served. It was one of the mornings she wasn't feeling great with the pregnancy. She dropped me off at our parish. Mass got done a little bit more quickly than usual. And for whatever reason, I was alone in the church. Mass had finished. Everyone had kind of cleared out. It was a beautiful morning. I can remember the sun coming through the stained glass windows. And I was in front of a statue of the Blessed Mother. And for whatever reason, at 13 years old, I was thinking about what I was supposed to do in life. And out of nowhere, a woman came up to me and said, "You'll make a wonderful priest." And to this day, I don't know where she came from. I don't know where she went to. But from that moment on, the thought about the priesthood was in my mind. I'd love to say that I fully embraced it. But for lots of reasons, I think as a 13-year-old guy, probably not the coolest thing to share with your friends. That's what you wanted to do. Came from a very Catholic family too, so I think probably some fears about expectations if I would have articulated that to family and to others. So it's just a thought that I kept to myself, to be very honest. I had great kind of priest role models throughout grade school in my diocesan parish. I went to a Catholic, all-boys Catholic school, Devon Prep. Had a great experience with the Purist fathers who served there. But I would say when I really could begin to imagine myself as a priest was when I got to Notre Dame as an undergrad. I lived in Morrissey as an undergrad. I had great examples of a rector as a priest, my priest in residence, those I'd encountered in the classroom. I recognized that if I was going to be a priest, it would be within the Congregation of Holy Cross. But as a senior, just wasn't ready to make that decision. So I often joke that I went to law school as a delay tactic. I'm really glad I did. I'm appreciative of the academic background. But the thought of the priesthood just wasn't going away in law school. You know, I was on a law journal. I worked for one of the firms in Chicago. Academically loved what I was doing, but that thought of the priesthood was still there. And so I kind of made a commitment to God. I said, all right, I'm gonna be open to this. And God, I just want a clear sign. I just want you to kind of let me know that this is what I'm supposed to do. I spent about a month and a half of my final year in law school just trying to kind of discern that sign, right? To hear that sign from God. And frankly, got a little bit frustrated when I didn't experience that. And began to question whether or not I was being called. And I had a good friend in campus ministry at the time, and she recommended I read the story of Elijah in the book of Kings. And if you're familiar, Elijah is an Old Testament prophet. He goes up onto Mount Horeb, which is the mountain of the Lord. He goes into a cave, falls asleep. He experiences all of these kind of great signs, right? The fire, the wind, the earthquake. The interesting part about Elijah's story is that God wasn't in any of those signs. So he goes back into the cave, he falls back asleep, and he experiences a still small voice, in another translation, a whispering wind. And it was there that Elijah encountered God. And that story and that experience of Elijah was transformative for me. I began to recognize that while I was desiring kind of this great sign, right? And I think all of us, as we discern our vocation, would love kind of that clear and expected sign. And certainly sometimes God speaks in that way. But at other times, God's call is much more subtle, much more unexpected, but it's no less God. And it was really that experience that really helped me to understand that I was being called to the seminary. I applied and was admitted to the Congregation of Holy Cross and began formation right after I graduated from law school.
Wow, what a beautiful, what a powerful story. It gave me chills to see you as a 13-year-old in that church and standing alone and having this woman appear to you in front of the Blessed Virgin statue. And so in some ways, I think your own calling, the whisper in the wind,
Yeah.
it helps you in many ways to relate to our students, right? Because our students, whether their calling is to the vocation of the priesthood or a particular profession or lifestyle or of the vocation of marriage, they're oftentimes looking for those big signs too.
Yeah.
And we, I think, as academic institutions, religious communities do this much better. We don't teach enough about discernment.
That's
I
right.
don't think. How do you discern a call? How do you discern decisions as opposed to deciding them? It's obviously something you've given a lot of thought to. How does that color your ministry
Yeah.
as a VP of Student Affairs, working with students?
I think, Lou, in a lot of ways, it's about being able to share our own experiences. I often say it's so easy for me at this point in my life to look back and to tell my story, my vocational story, in a really linear, straightforward fashion, right?
Right.
But the reality is, in the moment, and as I was experiencing as a young person, it was much more confusing. It was much less clear.
Yeah.
So I think part of it is helping our students to understand that although now I can look back and I can see kind of God's hand in everything,
Right.
it's much less clear at the time. And just kind of letting them know that, normalizing that for them. The second thing I talk to students a lot about is our desire for certainty, right?
Mhm.
There's a deep desire that I want to know for absolute sure that this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I think the reality of whatever vocation, right, as you were kind of discerning your vocation to marriage, as I discerned my vocation to religious life in the priesthood, the reality is we'll never come to absolute certainty.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things that's so powerful about the vows that both of us professed is that we didn't know for sure,
Yeah.
right? That there was an act of faith that has to happen. Now we have to do all of the good and hard work that leads up to that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I can't know for sure, right? I can't see the future. And so kind of that act of faith at the end that I believe this is where God's calling me to. I believe God gives us the strength to do that, which he calls us to, right?
Right.
And then to take that leap of faith,
Yeah.
I think is what makes our vows powerful.
So when I think about my calling to marriage,
Yeah.
it seems to be a much more common and standard for many people. The calling to be a priest, or just the calling to enter the seminary and that life of formation as a first step, is very much against the grain. How do you recruit and the people that influenced you? My guess is that you can't really hard sell somebody to be a priest, right? It
Yep.
takes time and it takes discernment and you have to nurture that, but not force it. Can you give us a little sense about those who influenced you and others that you talk with that might have a similar calling? How do you manage that?
To be honest, I think ultimately it was kind of watching people live their lives, and especially priests and religious that I encountered, living their lives authentically and joyfully
Yeah.
is what attracted me to Holy Cross. And I would say this, right? Getting to see the men in the Holy Cross community that I encountered at Notre Dame who worked together, prayed together, ate together, socialized together, right? Clearly, these were guys that had really authentic friendships and relationships. And we're doing this important work corporately, right? As a community. That was really attractive to me. I think it's ultimately what invited me in. I had Holy Cross priests. I had Father Tom Blantz as a history professor. I had Holy Cross priest as a rector, as an in-residence priest in Morrissey. I was encountering Holy Cross religious in campus ministry. I was helping to lead the freshman retreats as a sophomore.
Yeah.
So I think about all of those experiences that I had. And although they were all different, right? And it's true of us. All of us in Holy Cross are very different people.
Yeah.
The way in which I saw them live, pray, work together really invited me into that life. And I think about that in our own recruitment of young men to Holy Cross, is that it's really about living our lives authentically and joyfully. It's one of the things that I love about living in the hall. I hope that I can provide that witness, whether it be presiding at Mass, just being a pastoral presence in the hall. You might know I make cookies every Sunday night in alumni. So getting to encounter people in those kind of very natural more casual ways.
Yeah.
And being able to just have conversations about our life and what we do. For those who might be called, I hope that's helpful to them.
That's great. Well, there's callings within the calling, right? And
That's
and
right.
most recently, as of June, so just a few short months ago, you began in this role as Vice President for Student Affairs at Notre Dame. I would put that job right up there with head football coach and dean of admissions at Notre Dame as being three of the most challenging jobs easily on campus. And I know that you see the beauty in this work, this opportunity to minister and develop our students intellectually, emotionally, physically, spiritually, in so many different levels. But this job comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of conflict. And so why did you say yes to this call?
It's a great question. So maybe a funny story to begin. I got a lot of outreach after the announcement was made that I would be taking on this new role. It was very lovely, but I'd say at least half, if not 3/4 of those kind of notes of congratulation had something along the lines of, this is a really hard job. And I was like, yeah, I know. Thank you.
Well, because you did this job
That's
also
right.
at the University of Portland. So you come probably better prepared to this job than just about anybody.
Well, no, thank you. And I would say, in some ways, because I had been in this role at the University of Portland, and I've been a close collaborator with student affairs, even when I came back to Notre Dame in the Office of Mission Engagement Church Affairs. I do recognize that this is difficult, right? We are dealing with students when they're at their best, which is, fantastic, but also at some of the most difficult times in their lives, right? When students are experiencing issues with mental health, when they're walking through a conduct or a Title IX case, if they're dealing with sort of alcohol or drug issues, all of those kind of moments, we're called upon. And, we're on the front lines of addressing those. And so I have to be honest, there was probably part of me that initially wanted to say to Father John, thank you, honored, but no, thank you. But ultimately, I just recognized that I had to say yes. And I would say a couple of things. One is I recognize the importance of the work that we do in student affairs. And I think that we do so uniquely here at the University of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
The way in which we we walk with our students. I think the importance of that in our students' own formations, right? Intellectually, spiritually, morally. How do I say no to something like that, right? And it's something that I myself had experienced as a student here.
Yeah.
And so I want to be able to provide that same type of experience for others. And the second piece I would say to you is it was something that I experienced as a clear call from God. It was funny. I have two different kind of experiences of this. Over Lent last year, I was getting together with another Holy Cross priest, and we kind of made these Lenten commitments, one of which was I wasn't going to settle for being comfortable, which I kind of thought meant that I was going to work out harder, throughout the Lenten period. But later on, when Father John invited me to consider this role, that came to my mind.
Yeah.
And I'd heard a homily from Bishop Bob Barron. It was on the gospel, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it bears no fruit. And he talked about, right, a seed is kind of self-contained, it's protected, it's safe. But is that ultimately what a seed is supposed to be? Right? And it's only when it falls to the ground and it dies that it actually bears fruit. It actually becomes that which it's meant to be. And I think about that in our own lives, right? There are things that we're asked that are going to stretch and grow us, that are going to be challenging, that are going to have really difficult days. But if we believe that God's calling us to it, and we trust that God gives us the strength to do that which God calls us to do, how do we say anything but yes to that? And I so very clearly saw God's hand in this invitation and in serving in this role that I didn't know, that there was nothing else I could say but yes.
Well, it's a beautiful way to think about it. And thank you on behalf of so many of us for saying yes. So you've had a little over 4 months in the job, and you've already, in a sense, articulated what your vision is for the role. Maybe there's more that you'd like to say about that. But in the short time that you've been in this role together with your team, have you been able to start to think about a strategic plan for where you want to take student affairs so that we can best serve our students and shape and mold them in the ways of Notre Dame? So any thoughts that you have on that? It may be premature, I understand.
No, it's a good question. I have to say, a lot of people have been asking me the same question. Although I had a background in student affairs and again, know student affairs well, even in previous roles here, I think it'd be unfair to come with a fully baked strategic plan, 26-point plan.
Yeah.
I think it'd be unfair to those who are already part of this work. And so what I've committed to doing, especially in these first 6 or so months, is to listen deeply and broadly. So I've had about 100 meetings so far. I'm meeting with every director in the division, every department within the division, every rector on campus, with a number of external collaborators. And then really importantly, as we began this semester, I'm meeting with different student leaders, student groups and organizations. Last night I had a chance to meet with the Diversity Council, our Interfaith Council, and just kind of those type of opportunities to be able to listen. My idea is that I'll kind of bring together the themes from all of these conversations, and that will become the foundation for our new strategic plan. And what I expect is, as a division, we'll begin formulating that plan in June of 2022. So it'll give me 1 year in the role, the ability to do a lot of listening, to begin to formulate some of these themes, and then to be able to put these forward to begin that planning process. I do think about, and I might share kind of 3 contexts for the work that we're doing. And I think they come out of the conversations, some of my own thinking about our work in student affairs. I mean, the first is the pandemic, right? We know the impact of the pandemic on so many people, right? Across the globe, on, our own families, our own loved ones, on staff here. And, it's had a really disproportionate impact on some of our staff who've been on the front lines of working with students, serving in the halls. But it's also had a really a significant impact in the lives of our students. So one of the things that we've heard as we've surveyed our students was the lack of the ability to make the same type of connections last year on campus, right? Because of not being able to gather in large groups, right? Some limitations in having in-person club meetings, because they couldn't visit each other within the residence halls. Even kind of the wearing of masks in all of our spaces prevented the same types of connections that maybe students otherwise would have had. We've heard about the pandemic really impacting that, having that same sense of belonging, because students couldn't have the same traditions that we normally did, right? Whether they be dances and activities in the halls, right? Being able to gather in large groups, be able to travel with different clubs, or intramural athletics, different things. It just impacted that. We know that it had an impact on our students' mental health. That was obviously an issue that predated the pandemic, but I think it's something that the pandemic kind of exacerbated. And so we know all of these realities. So I've been thinking a lot about how do we build community, right? How do we help to provide that sense of belonging to our students? How do we attend to our students' mental health needs? So I think the pandemic is an important context for our work. The pandemic wasn't the only crisis of the last 18, 19 months. We also know that there's been really important conversations in our country on racial injustice, right? We know the events of the summer of 2020, the death of George Floyd. We know that this reality continues, not just in our nation, but also in our own communities. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? These important conversations that we're having as a university. So grateful to Father John, to Jack Brennan for the task force that our Board of Trustees convened, the report that was shared with our university community. The themes from that task force report will really help to inform the work that we do in student affairs. And it's an issue we're thinking a lot about. And the third context that I would share is the reality of religious disaffiliation in our country. It's something I think a lot about as a Holy Cross religious. It's something that I thought a lot about in my previous role. You might be familiar that in the spring of 1920, the Gallup organization had a poll. And for the first time, a majority of 18 to 29-year-olds would consider themselves to be religiously disaffiliated. Sometimes they're called nuns, right? Because they don't have any formal religious affiliation. I think this is a really important topic for us at Notre Dame, right? how do we engage in conversations about faith and spirituality with our students, right? How does that become part of the work of formation that we do, not just in campus ministry, but in residential life, right? In student activities? How do we who work at the university provide examples for our students, right? How do we engage in these conversations? And I'd like to think about how we as Notre Dame become a leader in helping with faith formation among our students, and then how might we offer a model to other institutions, especially other faith-based institutions. So those are three contexts that I'm thinking about in our work in student affairs.
Wow, those are three huge areas, right? I mean, they're like three full-time jobs in and of
That's
themselves to think about. But grateful that you and your team are focusing on those three areas. There's a lot of concern about mental health on college campuses, especially with this age group. Does it keep you up at night when you think about the concerns? And how are we here at Notre Dame responding to those increased challenges of meeting the mental health care needs and the wellness of our students?
It is. It's an area that I think a lot about. It's an area that when I was at the University of Portland, that I was thinking about firsthand, had a lot of experience that I can draw on. But a couple of things that I would talk about that I think are really exciting initiatives here at the university, and I think really important ones. The first is that in 2019, we created the Center for Student Support and Care, which I think has been a really important addition to other kind of supports that we have for our students. I'm really proud of the work of our UCC, our University Counseling Center. We're fully staffed. We provide amazing care and support to our students. But what the Center for Student Support and Care enables us to do is to create sort of wraparound services to our students. So obviously going to see a counselor is a really important piece, but so too is bringing in our professors, our rectors, peers, right? Other sources of support for our student who's in need. Being able to engage with families, right? To be able to understand kind of particular situations for our students, and also being able to provide supports for our students. And because there isn't the same HIPAA laws that our University Counseling Center is obliged to, the Center for Student Support and Care enables us to be able to bring around supports in appropriate ways and to share information, again, in appropriate ways to best support and care for our students. So I think that's just been a really important initiative for us, something I'm really proud of, something that I think we will continue to grow in these coming years, and is an important initiative for Notre Dame. The second I would talk about is we've recently received a Lilly grant to think about mental health of our students and to engage different partners across the university in that work. And what
Can I
we've been
interject
discussing,
something about that? Father Gerry, as my
please.
understanding is that grant came from Lilly,
That's
and
right.
Father John and made the decision of where they would put that grant. And they decided to put it, Notre Dame did, in this area of the mental health and welfare of our students, correct?
That is correct, Lou. And I think it underlined, right, Father John's own priority of student mental health. He saw that as a need. And I'm really grateful to the Lilly Foundation, right, for their support in this work. And a couple of things that I think are really exciting about this grant is, one, we're really partnering with different staff across the university, whether it be kind of our student activities and other partners, but also the residence halls, to be able to integrate them into that work and helping to be able to identify at an earlier stage the needs of our students, and to be able to better help to share and help our students to understand what are the resources that are here in the community that are available to them. But there's also something very interesting. It's called a step care model, is being able to identify what is the need that each individual student has and what's the appropriate intervention for that stage or that step that they're in. And an example of that is, I think our students are much more likely to talk about issues of mental health or mental wellness. I think some of the previous barriers that might have existed when you or I were in college, they're not the same realities. But sometimes, at a lower level need, what might be appropriate is something like, how do we take some time to be able to go and reflect at the grotto, to go for a walk, right? Maybe it's a conversation with a rector or an in-residence priest. It's a conversation with a club advisor or a faculty member. But also being able to just understand as kind of that need is higher, what are the resources like the University Counseling Center, the Center for Student Support and Care that are available to our students, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to align kind of the resources to the appropriate needs for each individual student.
Mm-hmm.
And helping to train all of us as a community to be able to identify and to be able to best kind of align the needs of the students with the resources. So it's a really exciting part, I think, of this work of the Lilly Grant.
That's terrific. I think Father Soren said back in the day that if we want to shape and mold the next generation of leaders, you don't do it just in the classroom, but you do it by living with them in residence halls. Lou Holtz, when he retired after his 10 years head coach, said if you want to find the real heroes and heroines at Notre Dame, look at the rectors of the residence halls. What makes residential life distinct and such a special charism to the Notre Dame experience?
Absolutely. You know, I think in our residence halls, and it happens across our Division of Student Affairs, right? And so I want to be clear, formation happens in student activities through intramural and rec sports,
Right.
through our GRC, MSPS, and so many other offices. So it really is a collective effort. But I do think, our residence halls are a hallmark of a Notre Dame education. And I think the idea, Lou, is that we live with our students, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we walk with them and we get to celebrate moments of great joy, but we also get to be with students when they're kind of most in need.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the loss of a grandparent.
Mm-hmm.
It's starting to understand that major that I thought I was supposed to do isn't the right major.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, this vision for myself and my future is totally different. It's the breakup, with a significant other, whatever that might be,
Mm-hmm.
that we have the opportunity to walk with them in that, right? And I think hopefully be able to help through that engagement, right, through walking with them, to see the possibilities ahead, right, in ways that maybe when you're in the midst of whatever it is you're dealing with, it's a lot harder to see. I say often, my greatest role as an in-residence priest is to offer some perspective to students when it's difficult to find.
Yeah.
And so I think part of that's part of the work in the residence halls. I also think it's an ability to start to meet people at a more local level, right, within the section or within a residence hall. Before then, we connect into a larger campus community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are places like in the classroom and other places across the university that we're known by name. That I'm within community, that I'm able to worship together with my friends. I'm able to just have those late night conversations about life and philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
There are places that I get to have fun, right? There are places where I can have serious conversations. And I'm really proud of what we're able to offer through our residence life. And I'm grateful to our rectors. I have to say, especially this past year, and the pandemic was a really hard time to be a rector.
Mm-hmm.
In some way, their relationships with students had to shift a bit because they were enforcing a lot of the health and safety protocols. And that was hard for our rectors, right? They are such a pastoral presence in our halls. And that's such an important part of why people say yes to that role. And I'm just so grateful for the tremendous work that our rectors did last year. I know that they took on a disproportionate burden, but grateful for what they do and grateful for the impact that they have in the lives of our students.
Well, I know for all of us who are graduates, we feel a tremendous allegiance to our experience in the dorms and the rectors and folks in residence, priests and others that have kind of helped us forge lifelong relationships that we treasure and nurture us throughout. Tell us about the Career Center. It's a really exceptional team that you've gathered there that do critical work with our students and helping to place them into internships and jobs. Can you shed some light on the scope and impact of that ministry?
Yeah, again, so proud of the entire team that I get to work with, right? But for our Center for Career Development, it works with both graduate and undergraduate students, right? And of all majors. And I think that's something that's really important. I think there can sometimes be a misconception among students that it's only for students in the Mendoza, College of Business. But the Career Center is made for all of our students. And a couple of things that I think are important. One is that we have the ability to work with our students, even in their first year, to begin to think about career discernment, right?
Mhm.
And how do we go about thinking about that? How do we go about gaining experiences that can be valuable for when I become a senior and can apply for positions post-graduation, right? Whether that be internships, experiential learning, student research that can make us, make our students a much more kind of attractive candidate. And so one of the things that we try to do is work with our students early. We integrate actually our team in the Career Center into the Murrow first year experience. So it touches on all of our first year students. They
Mhm.
have an ability to know of some of the resources that are available and to engage at an earlier time. We have a whole team that's really around employer engagement that
Mhm.
are working with employers across the country. We especially work with our alumni who are so generous, right? And are so grateful for their Notre Dame education that they want to bring, other Notre Dame graduates to their respective employers. It's kind of fun. Sometimes you watch them kind of fighting amongst themselves in order to recruit our students. So providing opportunities to be able to engage with a variety of employers. Things like our career fair. We've done now a virtual career fair as well, offering specific opportunities for various majors, various colleges across
Mhm.
our undergraduate student population. And we also work with kind of select populations of our students, right? Sometimes first generation students where this career journey might be a little bit new, or they don't have maybe the same kind of experiences that they can draw on from family members, to do some targeted outreach to those specific populations to help them in that process. So I'm grateful. It's a super talented team, Lou. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for our alumni who are so generous in helping us to make connections,
Yeah.
helping to accompany our students, right? Are so willing to meet with our students, to mentor them. And that's so helpful in that developmental process, right? And ultimately in helping our students to be employed post-graduation.
So folks that are watching, Father Gerry, if they wanted to reach out
Yeah,
and in their places of employment to offer an internship or
yep.
to interview some of our students for job placements and all that, how would they reach out?
Yeah, I would offer two different resources. So Ryan Willerton is very talented. He's our associate vice president for
Mhm.
career development. Certainly, he'd be a great first stop, and he can help to engage other members of his team. And a new director in our career development area is DJ Washington, and he oversees all of our engagement efforts. And so he'd be another great
Yeah.
resource for our alum.
Both terrific leaders, having
They
worked
are.
with them both, and so it'd be something you go to, the Notre Dame webpage, look for the Center for Career Development, and find out their names or reach out, which is
That's
terrific.
right.
Let me ask you a little bit about the Office of Community Standards. I mean, that
Yes.
is and the area that deals with student conduct issues and gets enmeshed in kind of these disciplinary matters, which oftentimes are complex and difficult. Can you tell us a little bit about that area, how it operates, and what is your philosophy or vision for how that can be an educative and informative experience for our students?
Absolutely, Lou. So I think maybe one thing that's helpful to think about where it fits structurally, it's in our office for student development and in our area of student development, right? So we think about conduct as being very formative.
Mhm.
For lower level cases, often a first step is a conversation either with a rector or, if it's an off-campus student, with a member of the team in our office for community standards.
Mhm.
And we really see that as an important formative conversation, right? And try to tailor whatever the outcome is to be an opportunity for a student to reflect, right? To be able to learn from an experience that what you've done doesn't define you or your future at the University of Notre Dame, right? It's an opportunity to think about how do I want to move forward in a
Right.
different way.
Right.
And so I would say that we really think about our work at whatever level as a formative work. Obviously, for more serious conduct cases, it's a little bit more of a formal process, but it's no less formative.
Mhm.
And even if a student is asked to step away from the university for a period of time, right? we do that because we believe it's in the best interest of both the student as well as of the community. And that we hope that that provides the time, the space, and perhaps whatever resources that we're asking that student to take advantage of during that time away, helps them in their own development and helps them to return to campus in a better way, right? To be able to engage in this experience in a new way. We also think very seriously about, even as a student returns to campus, how do we help them in a particular way, right, with that transition back to campus? What are the resources that that student might need to be able to be successful? So we really do think about that as part of student formation, similar to other experiences that we provide to our students. And so I hope that our students understand that. I recognize that probably conduct gets a particular kind of rap among our students, but again, proud of our work, proud of the leadership of that area and the way in which they take on that work.
That's terrific. How do you relax, Father Gerry? What do you do for fun? And I mean, I'm sure these new responsibilities can be all consuming. So how do you deal with all that?
Yeah. And, one of the things I think it's been helpful, I've been in senior administration for about 12 years now. And sometimes you learn, you've got to work hard during the day. You put in your best efforts and it's all going to be there tomorrow. So I'm going to go home, I'm going to pray, I'm going to get a good night's sleep, and then I'm going to do it again. So I think probably just reflecting back on what I hope to help to show our students that a little bit of perspective on the work that we do. You might know, Lou, I do try to run. I think I see you sometimes when you're out walking the dog. I've taken
you're running and I'm walking, which kind of defines the two of us at our different stages here. But yes.
I'm also started to bike a little bit. So you might know that there's this new trail that goes from campus down to Mishawaka and then up to Niles, Michigan. So I have a hybrid bike, so I enjoy doing that. My new avocation, and I don't know if this is relaxing or more stressful, is I've taken up golf in the last couple of years.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I like it. It's an interesting hobby. The harder you try, the worse you tend to do, which I think is probably a good kind of life lesson. But one of the things, obviously, we have a couple of great courses, the Warren Golf Course on campus, and then my favorite is the Burke, frankly, because I can walk.
Right.
And I've used it as an opportunity to spend some time with students. So this past Sunday, I went out with 3 of our juniors in Alumni Hall, and it's 2 hours where you're outside, the sun was shining, you get to have some really good conversations with students. I golfed okay, not as well as the 3 students did,
but you could hang with them.
But I could hang with them. So that's been a kind of a fun new hobby that I've taken up.
That's great, because the one thing about golf is it provides an opportunity for, deepening relationships. You're out there for a while, and that's terrific. Well, any final words or parting words of wisdom that you'd like to leave with us today, or to any of the parents who have students here who might be listening as well?
So maybe 2 parting thoughts, Lou, if that's okay.
Please.
One is, and it's a theme that I've been talking a lot to our students about, and I'd maybe share this with parents who are tuning in as well. The importance of reflection in the lives of our students. I'm so grateful for how talented Notre Dame students are, but sometimes they're so involved, right? They have 3 majors, 2 minors, 2 areas of concentration, right? They're taking on leadership roles in clubs. They're founding new clubs. They're doing undergraduate research. That they don't take time to step back, to pray, to reflect. And I just think that's so important, right? In discerning our own individual vocations and being able to perhaps kind of rest, rejuvenate, right? Be able to approach, the work that we do in a different way, right? To gain a new insight that we wouldn't otherwise have if we didn't take that time away. Often, actually, just that little bit of time that we spend in prayer or reflection pays dividends, even though we feel like we should just keep kind of hammering out the work that we're doing. It actually benefits from us taking a step back and taking that time. So that's one insight that I would share. The second is this. And it begins with one of your first questions, Lou. You talked about the difficulty of student affairs in this role, the difficulty of what we walk through, right, in the lives of our students, but also kind of the reality of that life can be messy sometimes, and life can be complicated. It can be hard, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. But I'd also talk about hope in the midst of the difficulty. We take as our motto in the Congregation of Holy Cross, Ave Crux Spes Unica, Hail the Cross, our only hope. And it's an odd motto in many ways, right? The cross is this instrument of torture. It's an instrument of defeat. It's reserved for the worst of criminals. And it's odd that we talk about that as our source of hope. But the reality is that because Jesus took on the cross, right? He took on sin and death, and that he brought about new life through it, that same hope exists for us. That as difficult as Good Friday might be, right? And it's hard to kind of see beyond kind of the difficulties of that moment, that there's something beyond it, right? That there's Easter Sunday, there's new life, there's the dawning of a new day. And I think that's the importance of the work that we do in student affairs and across the university. The founder of Holy Cross, Father Moreau, talked about education as a work of resurrection, right? A way to bring about transformation and new life, not just in the individual who's being educated, but that they in turn could help to bring that about in society as a whole. And it's an image that he had as he founded Holy Cross in the aftermath of the French Revolution, when society was torn apart. But I also think it's a powerful image for us as we deal with issues like racial injustice, the pandemic, so many difficulties in our own world, that education can be the source of transformation, of resurrection in our world. And that's why I'm excited to do what I do.
What a beautiful way to cap off our discussion. Thank you. And I, to your first point, I think the greatest threat to my spiritual life is busyness. And not taking that time to be still, to know God and to hear the calling in the words of Elijah in the whisper of the wind. So that time for reflection, that time for prayer, I think is a critical component that can get crowded out with the busyness of not just our students' lives, but all of us as well. So that's a great way to end things. Well, before I come back to you to ask us to close our session with the prayer to Our Lady, I just want to let everybody know that we'll be coming to you again 2 weeks from now, same time, same place, October 27th, and we're going to speak with our vice president and head of athletics, Jack Swarbrick, the James E. Rohr director of athletics. And also, I want to let everybody know who would like to tune in tomorrow night at 7:00. We are going to have a number of our different student groups in the stadium under the lights, are going to be performing different bands, different choral groups, and so forth. It will be a one-of-a-kind event featuring 12 student groups and over 500 musicians. And you just go.nd.edu. And it's in Music Fest is what it's called. So please join us for that tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so, Father Gerry, if you would, thank you again for bringing this time to be with us and sharing your words of wisdom and insight. And perhaps you could close us out with a Hail Mary.
Happy to. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed art you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thanks again so much, Father Gerry. God bless, go Irish, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Lou.
Notre Dame Music Festival right here under the lights at iconic Notre Dame Stadium.